as others roll in. So good evening, everyone, and welcome from here in Scotland, back in my native country. And this is our monthly free webinar series, and we're at the second last one of this year. When I was talking about doing this earlier in the year, Amy suggested this topic to me, autoimmunity, and I jumped at it. The reason being, I as a practitioner have seen a huge increase in autoimmunity in the last 5 years, and it's mostly been in the, let's say, recreational athlete space that I've been working. And yeah, there's a huge need for knowledge and awareness in this area. So Amy is a fellow nutritional therapist, and she's got her own journey within autoimmunity that she's going to share this evening. Plus, she's working specifically with athletes, I think more recreational athletes like myself. And I think you've learned a lot and have a lot to share. So I'm really looking forward to this evening. Like usual, I'll let Amy go for sort of 40, 45 minutes. If there's any questions that are really, really hot and relevant to what she's talking about, I'll unmute myself and ask her the question. If not, we'll have a good 15-minute Q&A at the end, like usual. And yeah, I think that's about it. So I'll pass over to you, Amy, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. I'm looking forward to it. Before I begin, I seem to have a box that says this meeting's being recorded that doesn't seem to want to go. Will it go? How do I get rid of that?
The logistics of
there we are. There we go. There we go. Okay, so yeah, my name's Amy, and I've been a nutritional therapist for just over 10 years. And the reason that I'm wanting to look at autoimmunity in athletes is, as Ian said, I developed an autoimmune condition about 2.5 years ago, and I've always been very interested, and I've done a lot of sport myself, only amateur, but it really did floor me when I had my diagnosis. So I think it's a really important area to be looking at. So what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to do it very clinical based. So how I would approach when I have a client, and I see quite a few clients now with autoimmune conditions and those that are wanting to keep active. So the way I approach it is how I'm going to discuss this today. So what we're going to cover. So a bit about me and why autoimmunity. So a bit about my story. A little brief overview of autoimmunity and functional approaches. I'm assuming that many of you already know about this, so I'm just going to cover this very briefly. We're going to look at stress, sleep and recovery, the gut, hidden infections, toxins, genetics, and then the exercise itself. Okay, so me. So this is me. This is me 20 years ago, just about to run up the Cross to Mont Blanc with my husband. I, at the time, was working hard, playing hard, exercising hard. I had a little daughter, and at the time I was a tax inspector, so something completely different from what I am now. So please don't switch off. Tax inspectors way behind me. And yeah, my mindset was very much on, you know, if my husband could do 70 press ups, I want to do 70 press ups. You know, if he could run a certain distance at a certain speed, I was going to try and do it. That was my mindset. And I think from what I can see from lots of athletes that I see, they're of the same mindset. And often it comes along with a very driven personality in all aspects of life. So, you know, trying to cope with education, work, family life, training, it all has a really big impact on the body. And as nutritional therapists, we look at a timeline when somebody comes in. So if we looked at my timeline from the age of 28 to 48, which I am now, in that time, I changed careers twice. So I became a lecturer, so I had to train to do that over and above working. And then I trained to be a nutritional therapist over above working as a lecturer, whilst doing the Cross de Mont Blanc another time, doing lots of exercise, trying to fit in around that, and having another 2 children at the same time. So if you can see over that period of time, the stress that I was putting my body under. And even when I qualified 10 years ago, I might have changed my eating habits, but actually I wasn't taking on board the impact that my life load was having on my body. And this is a really big and important issue with athletes, because stress has such a huge impact. 2.5 years ago, whilst we started training for the Cross de Mont Blanc again, I have a big affinity to France and Chamonix. My friend lives over there, so that's where we pull to a lot of the time. I couldn't understand why I could no longer even run a mile without being exhausted. And subsequently, I ended up being diagnosed with Addison's disease, which is an autoimmune condition that affects the adrenals. And so this is where my journey begins, with autoimmunity and sport. I've always been really keen on what's going on in the gut, and this will pan out in my discussion today, because that's still really important, but there are a lot more issues to look at as well. So yeah, as you can see, I've since being a tax inspector, I'm qualified nutritional therapist. I did the certificate of integrative sports nutrition with Ian. I am a kinesiologist, lecturer, so I have lectured in nutrition and anatomy and physiology, and I also did a bit of colonic hydrotherapy, which I'm not doing at the moment, but I'm also qualified in that. So, okay, that's enough about me. I will weave it in as we're going along, and you can see how my story plays out in what we're going to talk about. So what is autoimmunity? So the immune system is there to protect us, and it's got a complex network of cells and proteins and chemical reactions that are there to protect us at all times. But sometimes the immune system gets a bit confused, and these cells and proteins and chemicals that are supposed to protect us start to attack different parts of the body. So for me, that was my adrenals. For somebody with type 1 diabetes, it's the pancreas, and so on and so forth. There is a lot of inflammation. So cytokine storm. Inflammation is a huge trigger with autoimmune conditions. So trying to get that inflammation down is really essential. And we've got to remember that everybody that comes into clinic, or everybody that we are working with, whether or not it's as a nutritional therapist or as a physiotherapist or a sports athlete coach, the autoimmune condition, everyone has its own symptoms and it has its own physical reactions. So it's going to affect people differently. And I think this is a really important element to take into consideration, because how people react to a flare-up, an autoimmune flare-up, could be different. But generally, there is a lot of fatigue, there's a lot of pain in different parts of the body, and it can really floor you. So there are, I think there's over 70, maybe over 80 different autoimmune conditions now. So there are many, and they are on the rise. And as Ian mentioned at the beginning, more and more people are developing these autoimmune conditions. And the likelihood is, after this COVID outbreak that we've had over the last 2 years, those autoimmune conditions may be on the rise further because of the attack on the immune system. So we've got things like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, Hashimoto's, which is a disease of the thyroid, celiac disease, lupus, ulcerative colitis, type 1 diabetes, Addison's, and the list goes on and on and on. So people, and often once you get one autoimmune condition, you are much more vulnerable to more autoimmune conditions. So treating that, supporting the body to avoid more flare-ups is really important, because we don't want the body to start attacking other areas, other organs. So how do we approach this? What's a functional approach to autoimmunity? So the first and most important thing is we need to get that inflammation down. We need to dampen down the inflammation. And we need to modulate the immune response. So we need to stop the immune system being so fired up. We need to modulate it. And we need to manage expectations. Now, I know for a fact for me, I found it very difficult. You know, I was in a hospital bed. I was in hospital for a week, really, really poorly. And as soon as I saw the specialist, the first thing I asked him was, when can I run again? So when you've got that mindset, you're poorly, you can hardly stand up, but you're still wanting to know, when can you exercise again? It's a really big hurdle to overcome. So managing expectations is key. Often it can take a while because your body is no longer able to do exactly what it was doing before. You can't cure an autoimmune disease, but you can stop the flare-ups. You can calm that response down and make the body healthier so that you're not getting the flare-ups and that you don't get more autoimmune conditions. So since I was poorly 2.5 years ago, I haven't had another flare because I have worked so hard at calming the body down. I had lots of very good advice, and that's helped me extremely. So this is what we're going to do. We've got to manage the expectations of the people who are coming to see us. And we need to find out, what is the underlying cause? Why did the disease happen in the first place? And this can be for many different reasons. So we have genetics. We are often genetically predisposed to an autoimmune condition. So for instance, if we look at my grandparents, you know, there's vitiligo, there's rheumatoid arthritis, there's thyroid disease, there's, you name it, there's lots of these conditions in my family. But that's only a part of it, and it's quite a small part, really. About 30% is genetics, the rest is environmental, and these are things that we can do something about. So things like stress, hidden infections, what's going on in the digestion, nutrient deficiencies, food allergies, intolerances, toxins, genetics. And often when we see an athlete, or whether amateur or professional, they are wanting to follow certain food diet. They might decide they want to follow a certain diet. They may be under eating. They may be eating the wrong combinations of foods, and these can all have a big impact. So it's really important to know what is going on with the client. So let's start with stress, sleep, and rest. This is a really important place to start. So the risk of developing an autoimmune disease is considerably enhanced with chronic stress. This can be emotional, physical, or chemical. And when we're looking at stress, this can be something that happened in our childhood or something that happened a week ago. Stress can hold in the body. It can be emotional. So whether that's a grief, whether it's you have people, divorce or breakups, or problems with family or friends. Emotional stress is very real. It can be physical. It could be illness. It could be injury, lots of injuries. Stress it can be over exercise. It can be chemical. So what's going on in the body? Sometimes my experience is when I speak to people about stress, they think of stress as being, oh my gosh, I'm stressed, I've got so much going on, but it's so much more than that. So when we look at it from a functional medicine or a nutritional medicine point of view, we would look at the timeline and look at what's gone on from childhood right the way through until the age they are at now, and look at where is the stress in their life and how you can modulate that stress response. So like I just said, it could be work overload. So often, especially with amateur athletes, what's happening is, and I think also if I look at when I used to train 20 years ago, the target was often a half marathon or maybe a marathon. Now the amateur athletes are doing Ironmans, and they're still trying to bring up children, work all day, is still managing the house, the bills, all the life loads that come with that, and doing immense training. So all of this is a huge burden on the body, and it's about managing that. And if you've got an autoimmune condition as well, then you are really, that person is in a position where they're going to get more and more flare-ups. It's going to be hard for the body. So it's about managing that stress. So those with an autoimmunity, who are living with autoimmunity, it can be more difficult to downregulate their immune response when living with stress. I can't stress that enough. That's the one thing that really struck home to me when I became ill. So it's really essential to calm the nervous system and allow the body to heal from inflammation. And a bit of advice that I was given, and I'm going to quote him now. This is Mr. Ian Craig. He mentioned to me to write a list of energy givers and energy takers. And it's a really, really simple but effective piece of management for stress. So writing on a piece of paper, energy givers on one side and energy takers on the other side. And often the energy givers are the same as the energy takers. So that's things like family. And that's just what happens. We love our children and they give us so much energy, but they also can take some away. But there will be other things that can be reduced. So it's looking at that. And it, once you can manage that balance, then it makes it easier to manage the autoimmunity and continue with the training that we all love to do. And that's the important thing, isn't it? We want to get back doing the training and doing the exercise that we love. So calming the nervous system, how can we do it? I really like this picture because it's got an A on it, and I thought that was good. I'm A for Amy, Superman. Okay, so things like yoga, meditation, deep breathing. So when we think of deep breathing, in order to really help the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is that connection, from the back of the neck, it comes right the way down and it joins what's going on in the brain to all the organs of the body. There's a lot of research and a lot of talk about the vagus nerve at the moment, to get that really lovely vagal tone, so it calms the whole of the body. Things like deep breathing is really good, and meditation. And when we breathe, if we breathe in, say we breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. Some people talk about certain numbers of breath, but I find that more difficult. I find I can't breathe when I do that. So I often say to people, if, for instance, you're breathing in for 4, breathe out for 6. As long as you're breathing out for longer, that really calms the body. And, this can be done any time of the day. So scheduling it in through different parts of the day can just help calm the nervous system as throughout the day. When we have all these life loads, it just helps to calm it down. So also things like cold water, swimming. The cold water really helps to just bring you back, grounds you, and helps the vagal tone. There's gargling. You can gargle, that stimulates the vagal tone. Singing, laughter, anything you can do to just get you out of the head and that stress response and calming things down. Sitting in the garden and watching the ants wander around for 10 minutes in the day, a few times a day, this type of activity can really help. The energy givers and energy takers, like I was just mentioning, really good. It helps the person really evaluate where their stresses are. And sleep. So sleep, there's research that shows that poor sleep quality and inadequate duration of sleep really can increase inflammation, which is a trigger for autoimmune. So that cytokine storm again, the immune system being flared up, we don't want that. We want it calm. So sleep is really important. Get into bed at a good time. We want to be aiming for at least 8 hours sleep. I was listening to a podcast the other day where the lady was saying that actually anything under 7 hours is, you are sleep deprived. And actually there was a talk, wasn't there? Your last talk was on sleep, so I must watch that. So it is really important to get that sleep in. So, we can look at sleep hygiene. It doesn't always have to be technical and difficult things that we're advising people. Getting in good sleep hygiene, switching off the laptop, switching off your phones early on so you haven't got that glare, making sure you've got ventilation, doing something, maybe even colouring in before bed, takes you out of the thinky side of your brain into the relaxed side, and then you get a better sleep. So sleep hygiene is really, really important. So as I mentioned at the beginning, studies suggest that genetics is around 30%, accounts for 30% of all autoimmune diseases, but 70% can be due to environmental factors. So there's an awful lot we can do. One of the first, the gut, I'm fascinated by the gut and gut health, and it is key. I absolutely agree, feel it's key to all diseases. So if we can get the gut right, then we're really going to help. We're going to dampen down the inflammation. So the gut is home to 100 trillion microorganisms, which play an essential role in regulating the immune response, digestion, protection, and production of vitamins such as B vitamins and vitamin K. Certain bacteria, such as Akkermansia, for instance, really essential for the mucosal barrier of the gut. So if we think of the gut as a tube, this mucosal barrier that sits around that tube, it's really important for such things like Akkermansia, and what we eat really affects how much Akkermansia we grow within the gut. So it's essential we get the right microbiome. And mucus and secretory immunoglobulins, so it's secretory IgA, within the mucosal layer are a crucial interface between the immune system and outside world. In a way, it's a bit like the conversation with what's going on within the digestive tract and the rest of the body. Everything within the digestive tract is classed as outside the body, which seems a bit weird, doesn't it? 'Cause it's inside the body, the tract is, but actually that interface, that immune system within the mucosal barrier is really sending messages all the time as to whether or not there should be inflammation. Is there an invader? What's going on? So we really need to know what's going on within the gut. What is that microbiome like? Is it healthy? If we think about it like a garden, and if you had a lawn, and so you've got all the grass, and that's all the, if we imagine that's all the commensal bacteria, all the good bacteria that we need to do all the jobs like support the immune system and digest our foods and produce our B vitamins. If we imagine that as the lawn, if we don't feed the lawn with what it needs, we start growing clover and dandelions and daisies. And they are, if you think of the gut, that's a bit like growing the wrong types of bacteria or the wrong amounts of certain bacteria. So we need to know what's going on in the gut to know whether or not we're creating more inflammation. If we think about stress again, I'm going to keep coming back to stress because it is so important. Emotional physical stress can really deplete the levels of our secretory IgA, which then will leave the athlete open to infection. It lowers immunity and it increases these autoimmune flare-ups. So if we go back to my presentation, right the way from my 20s, when I was working hard, playing hard, and doing everything too hard, my digestion really suffered. And I used to suffer with bloating and constipation, and it just wasn't a good digestion. And even then, and that never really changed until I started my nutritional therapy. And then even when I was eating the right foods, I still had to work really hard at it. And it's only been since I've done lots of investigations into my gut with stool testing and seeing what's going on that actually things have improved. So it is really important to know what is happening in the gut and also to calm that immune system down from stress. So what we need to do is consider, is digestion optimal? Are there any symptoms? So when we look at symptoms, I think it's important to begin from the mouth and work your way down. So if we think about it, is somebody getting bad breath? Have they got tooth decay, gum disease? Have they got indigestion? Actually, the mouth harbors lots and lots of bacteria, and there is a lot of research now linking what's going on in the mouth with autoimmune and other conditions, especially heart disease. So knowing what's going on in the mouth is really key, and you can do oral microbiome testing to see what's going on there. Is there indigestion? Is there pain between the shoulder blades? So often people don't know they're getting indigestion. They just think, oh, I've got a bit of pain between my shoulder blades. They might be getting silent indigestion. Do they just feel full? Are they bloating, burping, constipation? Are they getting diarrhea? Are their stools floating? What color is it? Is there indigested food? These are all signs that the digestion isn't working optimally, which then leads us to think that if the digestion is not working optimally, then we are in a position where that mucosal membrane might not be good in the small intestine. We could be getting leaky gut. We could be then creating more inflammation, aggravating the autoimmune condition. So it's an essential part to know what is going on, what is the digestion doing, and how can we heal it. And one of the things we can really look at, and this is an easy way to look at things, is to look at what impact foods are having. So leaky gut can leave athletes more sensitive to certain foods, contributing to symptoms. So an easy thing to do is to keep a food diary and see what reactions are happening. It can be inflammation from the gut. So if we're getting a reaction to, say somebody's eating rice, and when they eat rice, they start to feel like they've got more of a foggy head, but they can't really put the finger on it, but they're not getting bloating. But that can still mean that they're getting a food reaction to it. So it's not always bloating. It can be a symptom in the gut, but it could also be joint or muscle pain. It could be a foggy head. They could just feel like they're getting a low mood. They're getting headache. Maybe they've got poor recovery after exercise. If we're eating foods that are having a response in the body, it is firing up the immune system again. And that's what we want to avoid with any autoimmune condition. So knowing if there's any foods causing an irritation is really important. So some of the main foods that might crop up, gluten, I would say gluten there's so much research linking that to autoimmune conditions that I would say leave gluten out altogether. But I'm not one to leave out big food groups. So I do think it's worth investigating what else is going on. But I would say gluten is a biggie. Dairy can be a problem for some people. Grains or pseudo grains such as quinoa, legumes, and often these foods can be more tolerated if we soak them or sprout them. So it could be the case that for a short period of time, we reduce them to reduce any inflammation. But then once the gut is healed, you can start to introduce them again, but in a form that's more manageable and much more easy to digest. So all the time, it's about managing what's going on. And obviously, if people are doing an intense training exercise, they need to make sure that they've got recovery foods and preparation foods. They need to make sure that they're fueling properly as well. So it can be quite a juggling act to get all the elements right. But even before they're doing those exercises, they need to calm the body down. So that is key. So looking at these foods, deadly nightshade can cause lots of inflammation, or eggs. So it's about experimenting and seeing for that client. There are tests you can do for food intolerances, but these tests can all mount up a bit. So I think sometimes doing a food diary can be a really simple way. And I think often clients know when they eat something if it's going to cause a reaction. I think we all tend to know what foods, if we think about it, what foods do cause a reaction. Okay, so. But what we do need to do, we need a rainbow diet, so rich in phytonutrients and antioxidants. We need to dampen down that inflammation. We need to support the immune system, and these foods are key. So getting, as much variety in the rainbow diet as possible. Bone broth, which is rich in collagen and minerals, is really, really good way to heal the gut and provide the body with essential nutrients. I'm a really big advocate of bone broth. If you have a client that is a vegetarian, then you could think about using seaweed. There are other nutrients that you can use. Prebiotics, so onions, asparagus, leeks, garlic, apples, konjac root. And actually that's a really good root to use because you can get it as noodles. So if somebody is finding that they're starting to restrict maybe some grains, they could use that in a ramen or something like that. So it's a really good one to use in. Probiotics, so if somebody's having dairy, they could have kefir, or if they're not having dairy, they could have something like a coconut kefir. Sauerkraut, so including these foods daily, kimchi, tempeh, miso, these are all lovely foods that you can include to really boost the gut bacteria and really support that, modulate the immune response. And that's what we want to do. Organ meats, really, really key. And then fats, we need these good fats wherever possible. So getting these in the diet is key to dampen down that immune response and the inflammation. So what does the rainbow diet look like? So I've got this off the, I need to go back. I've got this off the BANT website that I'm registered with. For if there's a condition such as with autoimmunity or any other illness really, they suggest at least 7 pieces of veg and 1 fruit, but I would go further than that. I think, the more the merrier. If you can get, I try to aim for 10. I try to tell people, just keep getting them in there. And the rainbow diet is key. So get in that variety. So, you've got cauliflower, garlic, ginger, mushrooms, then you've got your lemons and your spaghettis and butternut squash, you name it. We've got such a variety there, and that every different season we've got the variety. So getting the rainbow diet is really key. There are people like Dr. Cara Fitzgerald, big on getting however many cups, I think it's 3 cups of veggies in, also with the Walls protocol. There's lots, the research now is about upping this veg content, and it's a good thing to be doing. So the other thing we need to look at, so why has this, another reason why the immune system might have gone a bit haywire, is hidden infections. So we've got things like bacteria, viruses, parasites, they can all be a trigger. And, we live with these things all the time in the body. So we do, we have all of these in the body all the time, but actually, if they become out of control, that's when the problem can become. So things like Epstein-Barr virus. So has the person had glandular fever as a teenager? That can be a good indication that the immune system has been triggered early on. The herpes simplex virus, is somebody getting cold sores a lot? There are a lot of everyday viruses that people have, and they don't really associate it with, oh my gosh, this could be a trigger to something else. So it's really worth knowing about this. Certain gut bacteria. So I talked about the garden being the gut, all the lovely microbiome. Well, even within the commensal gut bacteria, so the bacteria that we want to sit within the gut, if they become imbalanced, so if we get too much of a certain bacteria, even though it's supposed to be there, that can then become a problem, and it can go from being beneficial to pro-inflammatory. So we need to really know what's going on in that digestion. What is that picture? Are there any parasites? Has somebody been to a foreign country and had food poisoning 15 years ago and then not thought any more about it? And has that parasite still been sitting in the gut? We need to know what's going on. Does the client suffer with water infections, thrush, infections of the vagina or penis? Are they sweating a lot? Do they have mouth sores? These can all be indications that there is bacteria or virus running havoc in the body. Water infections can be a key one. There are tests you can get, like you can get a stool test and an oral test. You can get a urinary tract test to see what bacteria is there, a vaginal test to see what bacteria, and is there any fungus? There's so many ways that we can find out what is going on, and somebody might not even associate it. They might just think, yes, I get water infections every couple of months, and they're just not associate that with the fact that there's a bacteria that could be really flaring up the immune system. So, you know, if you think about the athlete, they want to be training, they want to get back out there. So in order for them to feel healthy to do it, we need to cross off all these little things. We need to get the immune system to calm down and for the client to feel nice and strong. One thing I think is very important is I often get clients that come to me and they've done a bit of reading around things like hidden viruses, and they come to me, they've just been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, and then they think, right, okay, we need to boot out this virus, or we need to, you know, go gung-ho and clear everything out. And I don't think that that's a sensible idea. I think it's important to, first of all, get the body nice and strong and to put in. So start building the body up, start building the gut bacteria up, start supporting the immune system. And very often, once you do that, the body starts to try and come into homeostasis itself. And if, for instance, if we're talking about the gut, if the bacteria doesn't rebalance enough, then it might be time to go in, you know, 6 months later or 8 months later and do a bit of weed and feed. So weed it with some herbs, then feed it. So it's about getting a balance. But first of all, if somebody's been ill, they need to build the body up first. So they need to get nice and strong before clearing out. Okay, so toxic chemicals. I'm having a little luck here. I'm trying to speed through. I've got a lot here, so I'm going to try and speed through these last lot. So toxic chemicals. So that's things like, you know, what's in our food. So many athletes are using plastic water bottles. The BPA in plastic water bottles are going to be firing up at that immune system again because it's a toxin. So there are simple things that they can do just to avoid that. Don't make sure they use the right fats when they're cooking. So if they used, say they use an olive oil and they cook it at a very high temperature, that olive oil is going to go from being good to being bad. So we don't want these trans fats. So we want to be careful about the foods we're putting into the body. Likewise, what we're putting on our body. So cosmetics, you know, let's look for things that have got no chemicals in, because that's, the body's got to clear everything out. Everything that we put on our body has to go through the liver, and the body has to clear it out. So let's not put the body under any extra strain. Mold, is there mold in the house? Really, really key for triggering an autoimmune condition. So clearing out of any mold. All of these things interfere with the immune system at a cellular level, which can exacerbate these symptoms. So these can be simple things that the athlete can do to support themselves. When it comes to exercise, so we know that exercise, lots of research pointing to the fact that long-term exercise can reduce inflammation, and it can improve the immune system. However, with an autoimmune condition, the exercise can be a stress if they are not managing their schedules, they're not getting enough rest, they're not eating the right foods, or they're not eating enough food. So not eating enough is a stress. They've got lots of life stresses. So all of these extra stresses on top of the exercise, and maybe the type of exercise, can create a flare. So again, it's about looking at what the person's doing. And, you know, one of the things that we need to think about is, you know, are they scheduling in that rest and recovery? Are they scheduling in enough rest and recovery? I know for me that, you know, it might be that on a Saturday, I do absolutely nothing all day just to recover and rest so that I can do the rest of the stuff that I want to do all week. It's important for the athlete to think honestly and decide how they're going to manage it. If we think about when we exercise, the blood flow is redirected to limbs and lungs, and so that it reduces the motility in the digestive secretions. So this reduced blood flow and oxygen can increase the oxidative stress and thus increased inflammation. So again, you do the exercise and then you find a way of calming the body down. We then have poor absorption, so they're not going to recover from the exercise with the recovery foods because they're not absorbing them. So the athlete needs to be aware of their own body. Consideration needs to be given to the intensity, duration, and frequency and type of exercise. We need to consider the age, the level of fitness already. current infections, are they getting colds, what their work-life balance is. That should be feeding strategies and I should say fueling strategies, and then hydration. Are they getting enough hydration? Genetics. So we can look at genome testing, and I've done this for myself. This is really gaining popularity, nutrigenomics, and it can really help when you're deciding what nutrients, what supplements to take. Because if, for instance, you have a genetic SNP, which means you're not methylating properly, you can then adapt what supplements you're taking and what foods you're eating to support that. So I find that really useful, and it can be a really good way. We can see how, you know, what is inflammation, detoxification, repair renewals, hormone balance, and these can all be affected by our genes. So it can be a really good way of doing it. Some examples, Team Gene do it, and also Life Code. I'm sure there's others out there, but these are the two that I am familiar with. But it can be really useful, and for then anybody else in the family. So what would a protocol be? So nutrient status. So things like oat tests can be really good. For example, Genova do a metabolomics test, which I find is really good. A food diary analysis, so nutritics. This can be a really good way of getting the athlete to take control themselves. So you can initially do 3 or 5 days to see what they're eating and where there's any gaps. But then you can then get them to do it on their phone and tell them what you think they should be aiming for, and so that gives them a bit of ownership, and that can work really well, I feel. You can do antibody tests, so Regeneris labs, for example. I'm sure there's other labs that do it. They do something called mucosal immune screen array, which is kind of check for antibodies. Stool tests, for example, Invivo do an ecologics. Viral testing, so Invivo do a viral test as well. I'm sure there's others. These are just ones that I use, but there will be others. You need to consider stress reduction, geno testing, and the training regimes. Are they getting enough exercise stroke relaxation, and maybe things like getting the yoga in as well, so other types of exercise. And the diet is going to be absolutely key to sort of supporting their symptoms. So I think with supplements and herbs, it's got to be personalized to the person, and depending on their training, their age, and so many more factors. But some of the ones that I like are magnesium, I find is key, vitamin D, prebiotics taken as a supplement. Every day in my household, that's what's going into everything that I eat. We look at things for inflammation. So I use something called Inflammatone by Designs for Health. It's excellent to just daily keep my inflammation down. So I think that's key. Mushrooms, so Hephaestus are brilliant. They will actually do autoimmune protocols. So you can contact them with the autoimmune condition, and they will give you a protocol which works on stress reduction, gut health, immune modulation. It's excellent. Energy. And I've used that myself. Herbs such as ashwagandha, maca, shatavari, you can use these in your smoothies. You can make a hot chocolate with cacao and use these herbs, make protein balls with it. These can work really well at balancing the hormones, which will help reduce the inflammation. B vits are key. Our fats, so things like omega-3 and coenzyme Q10. These are just some. I've not gone into depth supplements because I think that it's really depends on the client and their presentation. Thank you. I went through a load of stuff there. I hope I haven't bombarded you. I'm quite passionate about it. So yeah, I wanted to get quite a bit in there. But any questions? As long as they're not too hard. I stuck to 45 minutes there, Ian.
That was impressive, Amy. Thank you. Well done.
I think I got quicker and quicker, didn't I?
No, you had a nice relaxed style, so well done. And I think you covered that topic very comprehensively, because it is a big area. You can go down many rabbit holes with autoimmunity. Okay, let's look at questions. We'll use the chat box, guys. So any questions you want, just type it in and I'll read it out for Amy. From Tracy, your thoughts on gut cleanses, how often, duration, benefits, etc. Thank you.
So I think it's about knowing what's going on in the gut first. So this is where doing a stool test can really be beneficial, because once you've done the stool test, you will know then. So if I talk about the Enviva one, because that's the one that I use, like I said, there are lots of other ones, but it will look at exactly what commensal bacteria is in the gut, but also any pathogenic bacteria, parasites, candida. It goes into a lot of depth, and from that you can see, okay, what are the levels of pathogenic bacteria? And often there might only be one or two that are raised a little bit, but you'll see that the commensal bacteria is often low. So I've seen people without any, for instance, Bacteroides, which is a really, really key species, takes up a lot of space in the gut. And when that's missing, that leaves space for the pathogenic bacteria to grow. So often by just feeding the good bacteria and getting that back on a level playing field, the pathogenic bacteria then reduces naturally. If there is a stubborn bacteria or a parasite that needs clearing, then I would look at it on a case by case, and I would only do it for I would feed and then I would weed maybe a week, maybe 2, maybe 10 days, see how the client's getting on, and then feed again. Always looking at where you're also getting your prebiotics to make sure, because what you don't want to do is just clear out and leave empty spaces, because then you're ending up with more, you're leaving a space for pathogenic bacteria to grow again. I know when I was training, it was all about the 5R program, and you had to remove before you did anything else. But I'm finding that more and more, by having the information from the stool test, it'll give you that gives you the knowledge to be able to go in gentler and a more gentle approach. And the body wants to get back in homeostasis. So by putting in the right nutrients, often I find that gut will rebalance. I hope that answers.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. You're right. I think the stool test is a great place to start. And I personally, I would not want to clear everything out of my gut, because I think you're right. Then you run the risk of inviting other, types of impurities or whatever bacteria that are not healthy. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just mirror that response as well from Amy, that yeah, you don't want to be too aggressive. I see so many aggressive protocols within nutrition, and people are then compromised in their health. You need to actually be doing stuff that's gentle and supportive and building to the body. So next question from Gerard. You mentioned quinoa earlier. Are allergic reactions quite common?
With quinoa in particular, I think it depends on, it is a pseudo grain. So if, for instance, lectins are a problem, then quinoa can be a problem, just simply because of the protection around the grain itself. So if grains are an issue, then quinoa can possibly be an issue. But I find as well that if you leave these things, if say for instance you leave the grains out for say a period of 4 to 6 weeks, but at the same time you are healing the gut, you'll find then that these foods may come back in if for instance you sprout them or you soak in them to make them a bit more digestible, because you're breaking down those lectins then. But for some people, grains are a big issue, and especially if you've got an autoimmune condition, it can be. But I'm not keen on just booting things out willy-nilly. I think a lot of all these foods have a really big part to play on the variety of microbiome. So it is about sort of managing that.
Yeah, that's also important. It's there's so many different types of restrictions now that you can make, that potentially these groups can make have a negative impact on the gut. But then you're too restrictive. And I find psychologically, emotionally, it can cause a lot of pressure on a person's stress by imposing a strict regime as well, which isn't going to help recovery. Okay, any other questions, everyone? I wanted to just query you, Amy. You said you trained in colonic irrigation I think before nutritional therapy. You don't use it now, but how do you rate that as a therapy with all that you know now? Is it something you would also still bring in?
I think it can be. I think so. I think there's two. It can be. I think it works lovely alongside the nutritional approaches, because, for instance, it can really calm the gut. The warm water can be really calming. So if, for instance, somebody is getting lots of and it does clear the gut. So constipation, it'll clear the gut lovely. You know, I've had a lot of successes with it. But I think you need the nutritional therapy approaches as well. So I think it works. You need that information as well. Otherwise, the symptoms will keep happening. So I think it works really well at calming the gut, clearing the gut, you know, changing that microbiome a little bit. But actually, you need to be feeding and you need all that other information as well. So I would never just do that on its own.
And when you talk about weed and feed, do you want to just go into that a little bit more? Like, what kind of products would you weed with, and what kind of products would you feed with, and durations that you would kind of alternate?
Okay, I don't do an awful lot of weeding because I like to do feeding. But when I do weeding, I might look at things like, so Vivo do a nice combination called microbia. So that's nice. So Oregon grape or black walnut, or, you know, there's herbs generally. But I think once you get the bowel moving, so often it's when it might be SIBO, for instance, so garlic can work really well as well, I think. But I would only do it for a short period of time. So 5 to 10 days, and then I'd be doing the probiotics and I'd be alternating. But it all depends on what the bacteria is. So if it's SIBO, for instance, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, some of the probiotics will cause more discomfort. So I find that GOS and PHGG work nicely in that situation. So I tend to do more feeding, and if there's any problems, then I will look at things like the microbia, you know, the herbs for a short pace of time. I don't know, how do you do it? What do you tend to do, Ian?
I quite like the section at the end of stool tests that look at sensitivities to different, they'll do sensitivities of the microorganisms that they've found to a range of drugs and then a range of herbs. So that's useful if I run a stool test. So things like oregano I'll use a lot of, but then there's been some funky stuff like ozonites I've been using that I got in South Africa. And that's a herbal blend with some wormwood and obviously ozone within the product. So yeah, it varies, again, very personalized.
I quite like berberine and grapefruit seed because you've got your balance in the blood sugars, but it also supports the immune system, and it's quite good at a gentle clear as well. So yeah, I know when I was first training, I because of what I'd been taught, it was about, okay, how can we, you know, boot everything out? But yeah, I just I'd be honest, when I've done the stool test, it's very rare that I've come across anything that's been massively, you know, out. Usually the bacteria is out a little bit, and once you start correcting it with the good bacteria, it starts to rebalance without the need for anything too drastic. So I think the knowledge is key. That makes all the difference.
You've got a really, really important question that's just been put through, Amy. your husband is asking, when will you be taking part in the Cross de Mont Blanc again? After covering such a balanced subject.
I thought he was going to ask me, when am we going to have tea? It's in the oven. When I'm 50, starting my training now. So yeah, a year and a half. I've had 2.5 years of, I had a year of not doing anything and just doing yoga and stretching, and then a year and a half, which lockdown came at the right time, of up in my walking and then gentle jogging, and I feel I'm in the place now where I can start training again. So yeah, when I'm 50, that's my plan anyway. I'm going to blog about it, hopefully.
Great, yeah, we'll definitely have you as a case study. Can I ask one final question? With the vagal tone stuff that you mentioned earlier, Amy, which is very, very important. You obviously schedule in a lot of downtime, and like I love going into the garden and watching ants. I've read similar meditation things, like watching bees flit from flower to flower and that sort of thing. You mentioned cold water therapy, and I think there's sort of pros and cons of that, because it can stress you into a kind of sympathetic response, but apparently the longer term effects are more vagal tone. Are you able to expand on that a little bit?
I'm not an expert on vagal tone, but I've used it. I used it from probably March, April, right the way through. I think the last time I went in the sea was the end of September. I'm not doing it now. It's too cold now. There are many people that are still doing it. And I just found that actually, definitely for my autoimmune condition, going in the cold water, in the sea, that's what I do, has a huge impact. So it just I could feel it calming my whole body down. And afterwards, for a number of hours afterwards, it just really calms the body. Working on, and it works on the vagal tone, and I'm doing it all the time. So if I can't get in the sea, I'm splashing cold water on my face, or at the end of a shower, I'll try, and I'm not so good at the showers with cold water. That seems worse than going in the sea. But even if it's just, a bit, it just shocks the body into, I think what it does as well is it takes you out. I talk about this a lot with clients, is you need to get out of your, it's like you need to put a break in that stress response. It's like you need something to just break it. So when you wake up in the morning, I know I used to be like this, I would wake up, and from the moment I woke up, I'd be thinking about when I was going to plan in my training, how do the kids have food, from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. It was thinking and doing and stressing. Even if I wasn't stressed, I was busy. I was doing, even if it was doing stuff for the church, or it was just non-stop, joining, being on committees for charities or whatever it was. I was filling every minute of every day with doing stuff. And what I found is that the more you can step back, and I'm not very good at meditation, so I don't do that because I still have too much of an active brain for that. But that's what the sea does for me. When I get in the sea, I can just calm everything down, lie on my back, look at what's going on in the sky. It just, for 10 minutes, it just does rein it in for me. And the same with sitting in the garden, just 10 minutes, just listening to the birds or just looking at what's going on in the grass. It's revolutionized my health. And I've not had a flare since I was ill. So I really feel passionately that it does work by getting in these strategies, colouring in, or whatever it is, getting you out of that thinky side of the brain. Doing cross crawl, I do things like that as well. So cross crawl, just to get the left and the right side of the brain. I did it before I did this tonight because I was thinking, oh my gosh. So there's certain things that I will just do automatically all the time now, just to get my body in a better calm state. Yeah, but I'm not a vagal tone specialist. You'll have to get somebody else in on that.
I think you are. You're a vagal tone applied specialist.
Applied, yeah. I don't know the technicalities. Yeah. Oh, I tell you what, I find
think
really working. Me and my husband have started ballroom dancing, and I tell you what, that you can't think of anything other than ballroom dancing when you're doing that. So that's good for calming the brain.
That's brilliant. I think that's a brilliant place to finish, Amy, because you know, this thing about putting your brain on park and feeling and tuning in rather than just thinking and doing the whole time. So yeah, thank you. I very much appreciate your talk tonight. So thank you. And for everyone else, we'll share this on YouTube tomorrow and send Amy's slides over to you, and just fire questions over if you've got any, and I can share those with Amy.
Yeah.
So thank you. And,
thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.